You don't belong in first class. Nicole's words sliced through the cabin like a whip. She didn't whisper them. She said them loud enough for the entire row to hear, her manicured finger stabbing toward the man in seat 2 amperes. Gasps fluttered from a few passengers, but Nicole's lips curved in a half-smile, enjoying the spotlight she'd just created. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus Carter. The plane hadn't even left the gate. The cabin air was still cool, humming with the faint whir of ventilation and the muted shuffle of boarding passengers. Marcus sat calmly, his frame steady, a plain black t-shirt and jeans draped over him like a deliberate disguise. He looked like an ordinary traveler, not the man who held 25% of Horizon Airlines. That was the point. Nicole leaned down, close enough for the scent of her perfume to sting his nose. "Sir, this seat has been reassigned. Economy is down that way." Her voice carried honey on the surface, venom beneath it. Marcus handed over his boarding pass without raising his voice. "Seat 2 amperes, paid in full, scanned green at the gate." She barely glanced at the stub before folding it in her fist. "We've seen fakes like this before." Then she let the ticket fall to the floor like it was trash. A few rows back, a young woman raised her phone, her camera light glowing faintly. She mouthed to the man beside her, "This doesn't look right." Another passenger, older, shook his head slowly. The unease was spreading, crawling through the cabin like static. Nicole straightened her blazer, heels clicking against the aisle as she motioned to the cockpit. Within seconds, the captain appeared. Broad-shouldered, arms crossed, his eyes narrowed on Marcus. "If you don't move voluntarily, sir, we'll have to remove you. We have VIP guests waiting." Marcus didn't flinch. He sat anchored, eyes calm, voice even. "I am where I'm supposed to be." The tension sharpened. Nicole's smile widened. She thrived on the spectacle. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man she tried to erase wasn't just another passenger. He was their employer. And in less than 30 minutes, the script on this flight would flip violently, publicly, and permanently. Nicole didn't wait for Marcus to answer. With a flick of her wrist, she bent down, snatched his boarding pass from the floor, and ripped it clean down the middle. The sound cracked like a slap across the quiet cabin. A couple of passengers gasped. One older man muttered, "That's not right," while a young woman near row 4 lifted her phone higher, the red recording light now obvious. Marcus sat still, his hands folded, his gaze calm as if the paper torn in half wasn't the insult, it was the system tearing itself apart. Nicole's smile widened. She loved the performance. "You see? Counterfeit. Economy is that way." She pointed toward the back like she was banishing him from sight. Another flight attendant, Brian, younger but just as smug, leaned against the galley wall. "Man, don't make this harder. Jeans and t-shirts don't belong in first class. Policy is policy." His words hung heavy, like a rulebook weaponized. Marcus finally looked up, his voice even. "You're confusing clothing with credibility." Nicole scoffed loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're protecting our real clients." The cabin wasn't quiet anymore. Passengers shifted in their seats, eyes darting, whispers rising. A woman in row 3 said, "He showed his ticket. I saw it scan." Her husband nodded. "Yeah, this isn't right." Nicole turned sharply. "Mind your business." But momentum had already shifted. A trainee flight attendant at the back, Mia Lang, fumbled with her device, slipping her phone into her jacket pocket with the recorder running. She looked pale, uneasy, but she didn't step forward yet. The captain reappeared, summoned by Nicole's escalating tone. His voice was firm, practiced. "Sir, final warning. Vacate the seat or you'll be escorted off. Horizon Airlines doesn't tolerate fraud." Marcus exhaled slowly, his calm unshaken. "Then check the system again." Nicole's hand hovered over her tablet. With a quick motion, she tapped the screen, and Marcus's name vanished from the seating log. "There. No record of Carter ever booking 2 amperes." The young woman filming gasped. "She deleted it, I saw that." Passengers murmured louder now, disbelief turning into outrage. A man whispered, "That's illegal." Another muttered, "Unbelievable." Marcus remained seated, anchored to the floor like nothing could move him. His phone buzzed softly in his palm. Without raising his voice, he said, "Rachel, log this. Send it to the board. They'll want every second." Nicole leaned down again, her perfume sharp, her voice dripping disdain. "You're nobody, and in 5 minutes you'll be off this plane." Marcus's eyes didn't waver. "You'll regret that." The silence that followed wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged, heavy, waiting to explode. Brian chuckled under his breath, shaking his head like the whole scene was a comedy. "Man, just give it up. First class isn't for everyone. Some of us actually belong here." A ripple of discontent passed through the cabin. A teenager whispered to his mother, "Why are they doing this to him? He's not even raising his voice." The mother clutched her phone tighter, her eyes hard with disapproval. Nicole straightened her posture, feeding off the tension. "Security will be here in 2 minutes," she announced to the cabin like she was issuing orders from a stage. "And when they arrive, you'll be removed for fraud and non-compliance." Marcus remained still, his gaze fixed ahead, unbothered by her threats. "Fraud?" His voice cut low, deliberate. "The only fraud here is the way you run this cabin." The young woman filming from row 4 couldn't hold back. She stood halfway up, her phone aimed squarely at Nicole. "He showed his ticket. You ripped it up. You deleted his name. That's not security. That's discrimination." Nicole's cheeks flushed crimson, but she doubled down. "You people always think the rules don't apply." The words hit like shrapnel. A middle-aged black man in row 6 stood up slowly, his voice calm but steady. "Say that again. Say it louder so the whole plane can hear." Brian smirked nervously. "Don't twist it. She just means—" "No." The man cut him off. "She meant exactly what she said." The cabin buzzed louder, phones raising higher, the murmur of witnesses building into a wall of pressure. Even Mia, the trainee, edged forward, her hands trembling as she clutched her device. She finally spoke, voice shaking but clear enough to carry. "I scanned his ticket at the gate. It was green, valid. He belongs in 2 amperes. Nicole spun around, her voice sharp as glass. "Mia, stay out of this." But the damage was done. Passengers leaned forward, whispering, "She confirmed it. His ticket's real." The captain's jaw tightened. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. He tried to reel it back in, voice booming over the cabin. "Everyone remains seated. Horizon policy will be enforced." Marcus finally moved, slow and measured. He reached for his phone, pressed a single button, and lifted it to his ear. His tone didn't rise, but every word cut through the noise. "Rachel, escalate. Full board alert. They'll want this incident live." Nicole's eyes narrowed. "What, you think a phone call is going to save you?" Marcus's reply was calm, chilling. "Not save me. End you." The cabin stilled. A hush spread, broken only by the faint buzz of incoming notifications as Rachel's call rippled outward into boardrooms far beyond that plane. And for the first time, Nicole's perfect smile faltered. The silence was suffocating, a pause heavy enough to bend the air. Then Nicole snapped, her voice cracking like thunder across the cabin. "Escort him out now!" She barked at the captain and Brian, her hand slicing the air toward Marcus like she was condemning him. Brian stepped forward, puffed up with borrowed authority, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Sir, stand up," he demanded, though his tone wavered. Marcus didn't move. He sat like stone, his hands folded, gaze unwavering. "Touch me," he said quietly, "and Horizon will pay more than your career is worth." Passengers gasped. A man near the window muttered, "Did you hear that?" Another whispered, "He sounds serious." The captain clenched his jaw, sweat gathering at his temple. He wasn't used to losing control of a cabin, and the unease showed. "This disruption ends now," he barked. But the words lacked conviction, and everyone knew it. From the back, Mia found her courage. Her voice trembled but rang with truth. "I recorded everything." Nicole tore up his ticket. Brian laughed about it, and Nicole deleted his name from the system. "I have proof." The cabin erupted, phones lifted higher, voices overlapping. One passenger shouted, "Play it!" Another yelled, "We're witnesses!" Nicole's perfect smile finally shattered. Her voice turned sharp, desperate. "That's illegal! You can't record crew without permission!" The young woman in row 4 shot back instantly. "And you can't erase a paying customer out of the system." Applause broke out in pockets of the cabin, raw and unplanned. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He answered without hesitation, his tone steady, almost surgical. "Rachel, status. Oh." Her voice came crisp through his AirPods. "The board is live. Compliance is reviewing logs. Nicole's deletion is already flagged. Legal's preparing suspension orders. Marcus's lips curved not into a smile, but into something colder. He looked up at Nicole, his words measured. Every second of this is being recorded. Every word you've said. By the time we land, you won't be crew. You'll be case law. The color drained from Nicole's face. Brian's smirk evaporated. Even the captain looked like the floor had opened beneath him. Passengers leaned in, phones rolling, eyes wide. The drama had shifted. What began as humiliation was now inversion, a quiet storm Marcus controlled with nothing but patience and power. Nicole tried one last strike, her voice trembling with rage. "You don't scare me! You don't belong in this seat!" Marcus finally stood, slow, deliberate, towering over the aisle. His voice cut clean, undeniable. "I don't just belong in this seat. I own it, along with every paycheck in this cabin." The words landed like a gavel. The cabin wasn't quiet anymore, it was electric, humming with the shock of revelation. And Nicole, once untouchable in her polished uniform, suddenly looked very, very small. The revelation cracked through the cabin like lightning. For a moment, no one moved. Then whispers erupted in every direction. Did he just say he owns it? He's the airline guy. I swear I've seen his face on Forbes. My God, they humiliated the owner. Phones tilted higher. Screens glowed like tiny spotlights, catching every angle of Nicole's frozen expression. Brian was the first to break. "That's bluff," he stammered, his voice stripped of the swagger he carried minutes ago. "Nobody like you." He stopped himself, but the words had already burned the air. Marcus turned his head slowly, eyes sharp. "Finish that sentence." The silence that followed was brutal. Even the captain looked away. In row 6, the middle-aged black man who'd spoken earlier raised his voice. "This is why people don't trust Horizon. We pay for service and get profiled for our skin and clothes. But today," he gestured toward Marcus, "today you picked the wrong man." Applause rippled through the cabin, raw and uncoordinated. Nicole flinched as if every clap was a strike. From the back, Mia stepped into the aisle, no longer trembling. She held up her phone. "I have the audio." Nicole and Brian mocking him in the galley, talking about deleting his record. "I'll send it straight to the board if anyone touches him." The captain's composure cracked. "Mia, you're out of line." "No," she said firmly, her voice finding steel. "They are." Gasps, then cheers. It wasn't just Marcus anymore. The cabin had turned. Witnesses were now allies, and allies were now a shield. Marcus lifted his phone once more. "Rachel, confirm." Her reply came crisp, undeniable. Nicole Harris and Brian Foster flagged. Captain Daniel under review for escalation mishandling. The board has ordered immediate suspension pending landing. Nicole's knees nearly buckled. She glanced at Brian, whose face had gone pale, the smirk erased. This isn't happening," she whispered. Marcus's tone was calm, final. "It's already done." One passenger shouted, "Justice!" Another added, "About time!" The cabin erupted, the walls humming with approval. Nicole reached for dignity but found none. She tried to speak, but Marcus cut her off with one line that silenced the plane. "You thought my silence was weakness. That was your last mistake." The words hung in the charged air, heavy and absolute. And in that moment, Nicole's beauty, her perfect smile, her polished uniform, none of it mattered. What the passengers saw now was simple. Arrogance stripped bare, power collapsing under its own weight. Marcus sat back down in seat 2 amperes, calm as ever, while the cabin around him vibrated with the knowledge that they had just witnessed the beginning of an ending. The revelation cracked through the cabin like lightning. For a moment, no one moved, then whispers erupted in every direction. Did he just say he owns it? He's the airline guy. I swear I've seen his face on Forbes. My God, they humiliated the owner. Phone is tilted higher. Screens glowed like tiny spotlights, catching every angle of Nicole's frozen expression. Brian was the first to break. "That's bluff," he stammered, his voice stripped of the swagger he carried minutes ago. "Nobody like you." He stopped himself, but the words had. Nicole's mask shattered. Her perfect smile was gone, replaced by wide eyes and a trembling jaw. She turned toward the captain like a drowning swimmer reaching for a rope. "Do something!" she hissed, desperation cracking her polished tone. But Captain Daniel didn't move. The authority that once wrapped him like a uniform had unraveled in front of a cabin full of witnesses. His gaze dropped to the carpet, shame painted across his face. Passengers began to speak louder now, voices overlapping like a rising tide. He showed his ID. They ripped his ticket. She literally deleted his name from the system. This is criminal. Ugh. Nicole clutched at the only weapon she had left, volume. Security will drag him out when we land. You think your little speech changes that? You're done here. Marcus didn't flinch. He tapped his phone once, his voice steady, surgical. Rachel, confirm execution. Her reply pierced the air through his AirPods. Confirmed. Suspension orders filed. Harris and Foster's access revoked. Daniel's case escalated to federal compliance. Internal audit recording live. Huh. Nicole's tablet buzzed in her hand. She looked down, and the screen glowed red. Access denied. Her breath hitched audibly. Brian fumbled for his iPad, the same error flashing back at him, his face drained of color. No, this isn't real. It's very real, Marcus said, his words deliberate. And it's permanent. A wave of applause erupted, louder this time, carrying through the cabin like thunder. Phones caught every moment, cameras zooming in on the collapse of arrogance in real time. Mia stepped forward, voice trembling but strong. You can't erase someone just because you don't like how they look. Not anymore. Not here. Cheers followed her words, passengers clapping, some even standing. For the first time since boarding, Marcus allowed the corner of his mouth to curve into the faintest smile. Nicole spun wildly, searching for control, her voice breaking. You think you can just humiliate me? This is my career. Marcus's reply was quiet but devastating. No, Nicole, you humiliated yourself. All I did was wait. The hush that followed was deafening. Nicole's beauty, her poise, the allure she had used like armor, it all disintegrated in the glow of screens capturing her downfall. Marcus settled back into his seat, his voice carrying not just to Nicole, but to every soul on that plane. This isn't about one man or one seat. It's about every time someone decided silence meant submission. Today, that ends. And with those words, the cabin erupted not with chaos, but with a sense of justice that no turbulence could shake. Nicole's hands shook as she clutched the armrest, her knuckles whitening. Her confidence, once unshakable, was bleeding out in front of an audience that no longer feared her. Passengers leaned into the aisle, their phones recording every tremor in her voice, every flicker of panic across her face. Brian tried to salvage control, his voice cracking. Listen, everyone calm down. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. Marcus cut in, his tone sharp, final. 2 employees abusing power, backed by a captain who turned away when the truth stared him in the face. The cabin hummed with agreement. Someone shouted, "We saw it all." Another added, "Upload it now." The teenager near row 6 tapped furiously at his phone, whispering, "It's already going viral." Nicole lunged for her tablet again, as if willing the system to obey her. But the same red error glared back. Access denied. The glow lit her face like a cruel spotlight. She slammed it shut, her composure shattering completely. Marcus stayed seated, his calm a weapon sharper than any raised voice. By the time this flight touches ground, you won't have clearance to walk through the employee entrance. Horizon doesn't tolerate fraud, not from passengers and not from its own crew. The words struck harder than any outburst could. Passengers erupted in applause, the cabin alive with vindication. Mia stepped closer, standing beside Marcus now, her voice carrying strength she didn't know she had. And if anyone doubts it, I have the recording. Every word, every action. Nicole's chest rose and fell rapidly. The uniform that once made her untouchable now looked like a costume, stripped of meaning. Her beauty, her polish, none of it mattered under the weight of truth. The captain finally sank back into the cockpit, defeated, while the crew he once defended stood exposed. And Marcus Carter, silent until now, had turned an entire cabin into witnesses of justice. What began as humiliation had become spectacle, and soon it would become history. Nicole's voice cracked as she tried one last plea. Please, this isn't fair. I was just following protocol. Her words stumbled, thin and desperate, nothing like the commanding tone she had used minutes earlier. A woman in row 3 shot back instantly. Protocol? Tearing up a man's ticket and deleting his name? That's not policy, that's profiling. The murmur of passengers swelled into a wave. She's right. We saw it. It's all on video. The plane wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a courtroom, and Nicole was on trial with 200 witnesses. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his presence calm but crushing. Protocol protects passengers. It doesn't erase them. You used Horizon's system like a weapon. That ends tonight. Nicole's mascaraed lashes fluttered, a single tear threatening to smudge the perfect mask she'd painted on. But the sympathy she once commanded was gone. Every eye in that cabin had seen too much. Rachel's voice came through Marcus's AirPods again, crisp and cutting. Marcus, compliance has confirmed. Harris, Foster, and Captain Daniel have been locked out of all Horizon systems. Their employment files are under immediate termination review. Would you like me to patch legal directly into the cabin? The announcement hit like a hammer. Brian staggered back, his tablet slipping from his hand onto the carpet. The sound echoed louder than it should have. He whispered, "Terminated? Already?" "Yes," Marcus said, his tone measured. "Actions have consequences, and yours are permanent." The cabin erupted with applause. Some passengers clapped, others cheered. A man in business attire raised his phone toward Marcus and said, "This is going everywhere. People need to see how dignity handles hate." Nicole slumped into an empty seat, her posture broken, her uniform suddenly ordinary fabric. The glamour, the control, the allure, it all lay, in ruins around her. She whispered to herself, but the words carried to the nearest rows. "They'll never hire me again." Marcus turned his head, his voice steady. "No airline should. Mia, still at his side, drew a shaky breath. "I've worked 3 months here, and I've never seen anyone stand up like this. Thank you." Marcus gave her a glance, respectful but firm. "Don't thank me. Just remember next time it's not me. It could be someone without the power to fight back. That's why you speak up." The lesson landed as heavily as the punishment. Passengers nodded, some murmuring agreement. The cabin had shifted from chaos to clarity, from spectacle to solidarity. And Nicole, once radiant and untouchable, now sat stripped of power, with nothing but silence to answer for her cruelty. The applause faded into a heavy silence, the kind that settles after a storm. Marcus remained seated in 2 amperes, his calm presence filling the cabin more than any raised voice could. Passengers leaned back slowly, their eyes still fixed on him, as if waiting for the next verdict. Nicole stared at the floor, her hands clenched tight on her knees. The woman who once strutted through the aisle like she owned it now looked like a child caught in a lie. Brian hovered near the galley, pale and restless, his confidence dissolved into nervous twitches. Marcus spoke again, his words deliberate, every syllable carrying weight. "In 30 minutes this plane lands, and when it does, you'll walk off not as crew but as cautionary tales." The line hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Phones rose again, passengers capturing every second. A man in business class whispered, "That's going viral before we even touch ground." Mia, still standing near Marcus, straightened her shoulders. "They'll remember this," she said, voice steadier now. "Not just because of who you are, but because you didn't let them erase you." Marcus gave her the slightest nod, then turned his gaze forward, unbothered by the broken crew still lingering around him. "They tried to erase more than me. They tried to erase every passenger who didn't fit their idea of first class. That's the sickness, and Horizon will cut it out." Nicole's breath hitched. "Please, you don't have to ruin me." Marcus's reply was quiet, final. "You did that yourself." Gasps rippled through the rows, not from surprise, but from the brutal truth of it. The cabin, once divided, was united now witnesses to arrogance dismantled in real time. The hum of the engines filled the silence that followed. The flight wasn't over, but for Nicole, Brian, and Captain Daniel, their careers already were. The cabin was still buzzing when the intercom crackled. Captain Daniel's voice filled the air, brittle and strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the disturbance. Please remain seated as we continue preparations for departure." Passengers exchanged glances, scoffs, and whispers. Everyone knew his words were hollow. Nicole sat stiff in the jump seat, her eyes red, mascara smudged. Brian lingered near the galley, staring at the carpet as if it might swallow him whole. Marcus lifted his phone once more, his tone calm, deliberate. "Rachel, confirm final lockout." Her voice came crisp through his AirPods. "Confirmed. Harris, Foster, and Captain Daniel have been fully removed from Horizon's crew registry. Their credentials will be deactivated before landing. Compliance requires your signature for permanent dismissal." Marcus's reply was measured, almost surgical. "Send it through." He tapped the screen once, and that was it. Careers ended in real time, broadcast silently to a cabin of witnesses. Gasps rippled across the rows, followed by an eruption of applause. Someone shouted, "That's justice." Another voice added, "Finally, accountability." The energy was electric. Passengers united in the rare sight of consequences delivered instantly. Nicole's voice broke through, hoarse and desperate. "You can't do this. You can't just erase us." Marcus turned his head, his gaze steady. "You erased yourself the moment you tore up that ticket, the moment you decided policy was a weapon, not protection." Brian blurted out, his words tumbling over themselves. "I didn't mean look. I was just following her lead." His attempt at deflection only fueled the disgust around him. Passengers shook their heads. A woman near the window spat back, "You laughed. We heard you." Mia stepped forward again, her phone still in hand, her courage now undeniable. "The system failed because people like you abused it." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. He just waited for the truth to show itself. Applause rose again, rolling down the aisle like a wave. Nicole covered her face with her hands, but there was no hiding anymore. The uniform she once wore like armor now clung to her like chains. Marcus leaned back into seat 2 amperes, his presence grounded, immovable. He spoke not just to Nicole or Brian, but to every ear on that plane. "This isn't just a flight. It's a reminder. Dignity doesn't come from uniforms or titles. It comes from how you treat the people you think have none." The line struck the cabin like a gavel, final and absolute. Phones captured it, passengers nodded, and in that moment, justice wasn't abstract. It was alive, breathing, undeniable, delivered at 30,000 feet before the wheels even left the ground. The roar of applause lingered, echoing down the narrow cabin like thunder rolling through steel. Nicole sat motionless, her hands locked in her lap, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Brian leaned against the galley wall, hollow-eyed, as if the ground had disappeared beneath him. Captain Daniel hadn't returned to the intercom. His silence said more than words ever could. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat, but his voice carried with authority. "Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty. You'll exit this plane as passengers, not crew. And when you do, you'll carry the weight of your choices with you." Gasps burst across the rows. Phones captured the moment from every angle. A woman whispered to her husband, "He just fired them mid-flight." Another muttered, "I've never seen anything like this." Nicole finally snapped. She stood abruptly, her legs unsteady, her voice cracking. "You can't strip everything from me in one night." Marcus's gaze didn't flinch. "In one night? You did it in one decision. That's how fast hate works. It destroys faster than it builds." The words sliced through the air. The passengers erupted again, some clapping, others shouting approval. A teenager near row 6 shouted, "Tell it!" while Mia's eyes glistened with something close to pride. Brian sank into an empty seat, burying his face in his hands. Nicole hovered in the aisle, trembling, her once flawless posture shattered. Every ounce of power she had wielded minutes ago was gone, stripped clean by her own arrogance. Marcus leaned back, his tone lower now, but just as sharp. "The difference between you and me is simple. You thought silence meant weakness. I know silence is strategy." The line landed hard, phones catching it instantly. The cabin went still for a beat, every passenger absorbing the truth. And just like that, the balance of power was complete. The crew who once ruled the cabin now sat condemned in their own uniforms, while Marcus Carter, calm and steady in seat 2 amperes, commanded the room without ever raising his voice. The engines rumbled, the final checks complete, but the cabin was still suspended in the aftermath of judgment. Nicole sat slumped in the jump seat, her face streaked with ruined makeup. Brian remained in silence, his hands covering his eyes. Captain Daniel hadn't returned from the cockpit. His authority had evaporated along with theirs. Passengers whispered among themselves, some still holding up phones, others shaking their heads in disbelief. What had started as humiliation for one man had become a spectacle of justice for everyone to see. Marcus adjusted his seatbelt and looked out the small oval window. For the first time, he allowed himself a quiet exhale. The storm had passed, but its lessons lingered in the air like smoke. He turned back toward the cabin, his voice steady, carrying the weight of finality. "This seat," he said, placing a hand on the armrest of 2 amperes, "was never about leather or legroom. It was about respect. Tonight you all saw how quickly people decide who deserves it and how wrong they can be. The cabin hushed, every passenger listening. Nicole shook her head weakly, whispering under her breath, "I didn't mean to..." But Marcus didn't look her way. He wasn't speaking to her anymore. He was speaking to the witnesses. "You'll post your videos. You'll tell your friends," Marcus continued. "And when you do, remember this dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It stands its ground until the truth has no choice but to reveal itself." Mia stood straighter at his words, her young face lit by conviction. Passengers nodded. Some even clapped softly, their applause not explosive this time, but reverent, like they were honoring something larger than themselves. The plane jolted slightly as it pushed back from the gate. Marcus fastened his belt, his expression calm. He'd said enough. The message was written not just in his words, but in the silence that followed, silence filled with witnesses who had seen arrogance fall and patience prevail. As the lights dimmed for takeoff, Nicole's eyes darted nervously to the floor. Brian shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and the passengers leaned back, their phones still recording, their minds still replaying what had unfolded. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, letting the hum of the engine steady him. Before the wheels even left the ground, justice had already flown higher than any plane. And as the aircraft began its roll down the runway, every person aboard knew one thing with absolute clarity. The man they tried to erase was the one who owned the sky they were flying through.